Hello and welcome. Come on in, get comfortable. We are going to tackle today's explainer on strategic management just like a personal tutoring session. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide through this comprehensive textbook level deep dive. We're going to look really closely at both how strategies are formulated and, maybe even more importantly, how they're actually executed. I want you to just relax and settle in because we're taking a very unhurried, focused approach today. Whether you're, studying for a major exam, maybe you're running your own business, or you're just trying to understand why some organizations completely crush it while others really struggle, well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to break down the must-know facts, we'll apply them to the real world, and make sure you walk away with a really deep, practical understanding. So let's get into it. Here is a quick look at our syllabus for today's masterclass. We'll start with the basics of strategy, move into the strategic process, master the SWOT analysis, cover corporate strategy and the BCG matrix, dive into Porter's strategies, and finish up with execution and control. Okay, Section 1, Basics of Strategic Management, Setting the Foundation. Let's go ahead and lay down our core foundation and define exactly what we mean when we say strategy.
So strategic management involves the decisions and actions used to formulate and execute strategies that provide a competitively superior fit between the organization and its environment. Now let's unpack that a bit, right? The ultimate goal here, the whole shebang, is achieving what we call a competitive advantage. Basically, this is the ability to do something so incredibly well that you just outperform your competitors. And even better than that is a sustainable competitive advantage. That's one that is literally so ingrained, it's very difficult for anyone else to copy. For a quick real-world example, think about Amazon's massive distribution network or Apple's totally seamless device ecosystem. Their strategies give them this distinctive edge that perfectly fits what the modern market environment is demanding from them.
Now, a really important thing to understand is that strategy doesn't just happen in one place. It actually happens across three distinct levels. At the very top, in red, we have the corporate level strategy. This answers the big overarching question: what business are we in? It sets the long-term direction for the entire enterprise. But right below that, in green, we have the business level strategy. See, large corporations divide themselves into strategic business units, or SBUs. In this real-world example here, we see a consumer products unit, a biotechnology unit, and a media unit. The strategy at this level answers, how do we compete within this specific industry? And finally, down there in blue, we have the functional level strategy. This is your finance, R&D, manufacturing, marketing. This level answers, how do we support the business level strategy? You have to align all three of these levels for an organization to actually succeed. Section 2, the strategic management process, a step-by-step flow. Strategy isn't just a brilliant idea you have in the shower. It is a very rigorous, step-by-step process. Let me act as your guide through this roadmap here. If you look at the purple box on the far left, we always start by evaluating our current mission, goals, and strategies. But before we define anything new, look at the blue boxes. We must scan both the external environment, so things like national and global trends, and our internal environment to identify our core competencies. This scanning feeds directly into identifying strategic factors, which is that red cloud right in the middle, the SWOT analysis. Only after deeply understanding these factors do we move to the yellow box to define our new mission, the purple box to actually formulate our strategy, and finally, the green box on the far right to execute it. So the absolutely crucial point here is the sequence. Let me give you an explicit application step right now. How does a real manager actually use this? Imagine you're managing a business and sales have suddenly just dropped off a cliff. Well, a bad manager immediately tries to change the strategy or launch a new product. They skip straight to step 4. But a strategic manager, they follow this sequence logically. You stop. You scan the environment first. Did a new competitor just enter the market? Or did our internal manufacturing quality drop? You conduct the SWOT analysis to isolate the actual problem, and only then do you reformulate your goals and strategies. You never, ever skip the diagnostic steps. Okay, time for an exam prep pro tip. Listen up, because if you are taking a management test, questions love to ask for the exact distinction between formulation and execution. To get full marks, you need to articulate that strategy formulation is the planning phase. It's assessing the external environment and internal problems to create your goals and strategy. Simply put, it is the thinking. Strategy execution, on the other hand, is the doing phase. It's the use of managerial and organizational tools to actually direct resources toward accomplishing those strategic results. Never confuse the brilliant plan with the hard, roll-up-your-sleeves work of carrying it out. Moving on to Section 3, Mastering the SWOT Analysis, the Diagnostics.
Let's step a bit deeper into the formulation phase and master this ultimate diagnostic tool.
Before I show you the tool, I want to simulate a test environment and ask you this rhetorical question. When you're sitting in a boardroom, how exactly do you go about evaluating your internal strengths and identifying your external threats? Like, where do you even look? Let's uncover the audit tools. Here is the very famous 4-quadrant SWOT analysis. Let's methodically break this down because there is a critical distinction you absolutely must memorize. Look at the top half, strengths and weaknesses. These are strictly internal assessments of the organization. Things like your manufacturing efficiency, a highly skilled workforce, or maybe outdated facilities. These are inside your control. Now look at the bottom half, opportunities and threats. These are strictly external assessments of the environment. A strong economy, emerging technologies, new competitors, changing market tastes. If you're analyzing a company, a new government regulation is a threat. It's not a weakness. A really great R&D team is a strength, not an opportunity. You have to keep the internal and external strictly separated.
And this brilliantly illustrates your concrete application step for gathering real SWOT data in a company. Because instead of just guessing, you use an audit checklist, just like this one. If you need to assess internal strengths and weaknesses, you look at management and HR. What is our staff quality and our turnover rate? For marketing, you look at your market share and customer satisfaction scores. For finance, analyze those profit margins. For production, check your machinery obsolescence and quality control metrics. The takeaway here, you don't just guess your strengths, you audit these specific organizational dimensions to find hard, undeniable data. Section 4, Corporate Strategy and the BCG Matrix, the Corporate Toolkit. With our diagnostics done, we are shifting back up to the top level where CEOs make those really big portfolio decisions. At this corporate level, we look at what's called portfolio strategy. This pertains to the mix of strategic business units, or SBUs, and product lines that provide synergy and competitive advantage. The golden rule here is that organizations shouldn't become too dependent on just one single business. Think of it like a personal financial portfolio. You wouldn't rely entirely on one single stock, right? Well, a corporation needs a balanced mix of SBUs, just like that mix of consumer products, biotech, and media we saw earlier. Now, when we look at the Boston Consulting Group, or BCG matrix, I have a massive exam prep pro tip to give you. You must know how to plot an SBU by looking at the two axes. The vertical axis is market growth rate, from low to high. The horizontal axis is market share, from low to high. If an SBU has high market share and a high growth industry, it's a star. You invest heavily there for growth. If it has high share but in a low growth, mature industry, it's a cash cow. It makes steady money that you use to fund other units. If it has low share and a high growth industry, it's a question mark. It could become a star or it could completely fail. And if it has low share and a low growth industry, it's a dog, and usually the strategy there is retrenchment or just selling it off. Always look at the axes first to find your answer. Section 5, Porter's Business Level Strategies, the Business Toolkit. Transitioning down to the business level, how does a single unit actually compete against rivals? Well, according to the legendary Michael Porter, strategic planners have to answer two absolutely crucial questions that create fundamental trade-offs. First, will the target market scope you serve be broad, meaning industry-wide, or narrow, targeting a very specific segment? Second, what is your source of competitive advantage? Are you aiming to be the absolute lowest cost producer, or are you aiming for product uniqueness, where people will happily pay a premium? Because here's the reality. You usually can't be everything to everyone. You really have to choose your lane. And that brings us to Porter's generic business level strategies matrix. Let's carefully unpack all four of these quadrants. If you target a broad market and compete on low cost, you're using a cost leadership strategy. A perfect real-world example, Walmart. Huge market, everyday low prices. Now, if you target a broad market but compete on product uniqueness, that's a differentiation strategy. Think of Apple. They target millions of people, but they charge a premium because their design and software are totally unique. Now, if you go down to a narrow market segment, you are using a focus strategy. You can have a focus strategy based on low cost, like a small local discount grocery store, or a focus strategy based on differentiation. Think of a high-end luxury sports car manufacturer that only makes, say, 500 totally unique cars a year. See how that works? Okay, Section 6, Strategy, Execution, and Control, the follow-through. We've done the planning. Now we really need to emphasize action.
As our source material enthusiastically points out, what are all the best laid plans without actions to carry them out? I absolutely love this quote because it hits the nail on the head regarding a harsh truth in business. Formulating the strategy is literally only half the battle. A brilliant plan on a piece of paper is completely useless if the organization cannot mobilize to make it a reality. Execution is incredibly difficult because it requires changing the actual organization. Referring back to the final step of our strategic management process diagram we saw earlier, execution requires supportive management practices and systems that foster results. It relies heavily on strategic leadership. Leaders have to keep people motivated, keep them on track with the strategy, and help them make really difficult trade-offs day to day. You might actually have to change the corporate culture, restructure the whole hierarchy, or completely overhaul your communication systems just to make the new strategy work.
Finally, no discussion of strategy is complete without the element of control. Strategic control is about ensuring strategies are well implemented. So here is your final application step. A great manager is constantly monitoring the results. If the execution is working, great, keep going. But as circumstances change, like a sudden economic downturn, you must modify the strategy. And in the worst-case scenario, if the hard data shows the strategy is just failing, strategic control means having the courage to call off poor strategies. Don't let sunk costs ruin the company. You pivot when the data tells you to. Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, all the way from the lofty heights of corporate portfolio management down to the gritty reality of execution and control. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought to apply right now. If you were tasked with evaluating your organization or a business you just really love today, which quadrant of the BCG matrix or Porter's strategy would you tackle first to find their competitive advantage? Think about it, apply your new textbook-level knowledge, and start thinking strategically. Thank you so much for joining me for this Masterclass Explainer, and keep learning.